18 years.
You still love it?
Love it as much as I ever did.
So we're sitting here on a Sunday, football game going in the background. We saw clients today. Is there one thing that you hope to accomplish?
I just want to be able to help people. I want to be able to see the truth come out. I don't want to see people get exploited and taken advantage of. And I want to be able to accomplish telling the truth inside of a courtroom. Because a lot of people don't know the truth.
What was once a promising young athlete with trophies in baseball, basketball, and soccer is now wheelchair-bound with memory problems and dreams of someday being able to return to life as he once knew it.
Steps must be taken to ensure that this does not happen to another child. He will no longer walk again. His health has been taken away. His freedom has been taken away. His dignity has been taken away. That is unacceptable.
Attorneys representing the family of the late Rukati Sue called the shooting a massacre.
An officer made a terrible mistake, overreacted, and destroyed the lives of an entire community.
A deputy tells Eyewitness News only one officer fired his weapon at the suspect, who he feared was attempting to ram the getaway car into another deputy.
This did not have to happen. It was not supposed to happen, and it was entirely unnecessary and unjustified.
He didn't deserve to die. Lawrence should be right here, right now with us.
Winston Hayes is speaking out about the excessive force case that nearly cost him his life, but will ultimately make him a millionaire. A Los Angeles County jury awarded Hayes $1.3 million earlier this month.
This is not just about an individual. It's about the way the police respond in certain communities.
66 bullets hit Hayes' SUV. 11 struck the deputy's own patrol cars. About a dozen more hit nearby residences. One deputy, however, was knocked down by friendly fire, but survived because of his bullet-resistant vest.
The police used excessive force. This wasn't called for. It just didn't have to happen.
Joining me now is the attorney for the Loggins family, Brian Dunn. Mr. Dunn, we appreciate you joining me. Let me just begin with what has Sergeant Loggins' widow told you about what he was doing there that very, very early morning at that high school?
Well, thank you for having me, Brooke. And specifically what we know is that pursuant to a ritual that the family had, they were going on a prayer walk. They were very religious. Mr. Loggins was very religious. And in the early morning hours, it was his practice to go to the playing field of the San Clemente High School and walk with his daughters and meditate in a spirit of prayer. And that's what they were out there for, and that's what they were doing this morning.
So this was something fairly typical. This was typical behavior of Mr. Loggins, even though it was 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, to not only go and bring his Bible and go on these prayer walks, as you mentioned, around the school track, but to also take his daughters with him.
Absolutely. Not only was the prayer walk typical, but the time of day was typical. This was a full-time Marine. He was on the clock. He had to be very busy. And these particular mornings, those were the times when he had a special private time with his daughters.
Let me ask you about this video here. This video from the surveillance camera we mentioned, we're getting it right now, CNN is, but from what I understand, it's 31 minutes actually of tape. Have you seen this video?
I have.
And what does it show?
Well, what we see is what appears to be a traffic accident. We see the SUV that was driven by Mr. Loggins appear to run or drive into a gate. The severity of the accident is not clear. The extent of the property damage is not clear. I have had a chance to look at the vehicle. There is some damage to the vehicle. And following that, we see the sheriff's deputy with its lights on, not sirens, follow the police vehicle. I think, Brooke, what's important about this video is not what it shows, but what it doesn't show. This is a case involving the death of a man. It was a man that was shot and killed in the presence of his two daughters. We know that he wasn't armed. We have no concept as to why the deputy fired. We know that the deputy was not in fear of his life. We know that no crime had been committed. And at the same time, deadly force was used, specifically force that resulted in the death of this individual. And not only was he killed in his car, but he was killed in the immediate presence of two of his daughters who were aged 14 and 9. So when we start talking about the video, what we're interested in, what the family is interested in, is answers regarding why this shooting happened in the way that it did.
But I do have to ask here about these two daughters, these young daughters, as you point out, 9, 14 years of age. They were in the car. They witnessed this horrific incident. And I know that police questioned them for multiple hours. How involved will they be, Mr. Dunn, in this case that you're building against the county right now?
Well, they have a dual role, Brooke. As heirs of Sergeant Loggins, they act in the capacity as plaintiffs in a wrongful death case. But what's unusual about their position here is that not only were they plaintiffs, but they were also what we call percipient witnesses. In other words, they saw exactly what occurred. They were there when it happened. They perceived it happening, and they remember what happened. And I can tell you that with regard to what their position is, we're not hearing anything from those girls saying that their father was acting irrational. We know that he wasn't armed with any kind of weapon. We're not hearing anything out of these girls that is leading us to believe that there can even be the remotest justification for the use of deadly force.
How are they?
They are going to never be the same. This incident has scarred them and has left a mark that will never be healed. They are going to have problems as a result of this deputy's misconduct for the rest of their lives.
All right, Counselor, where am I going wrong here?
Well, thank you very much for having me on,
Pleasure.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Pleasure.
And specifically, in this particular case, at a minimum, we know that the Los Angeles Police Department officer Stephen Garcia violated the policies of the Los Angeles Police Department. Specifically, prior to the date of this incident, shooting into vehicles under any circumstances was strongly discouraged as a practice within the department. And following this incident...
Yeah, they banned it. But look, I don't want to try to case here. What I'm saying to you is you may be absolutely correct. But you're going to have 3 investigations. You're going to have your investigation that your law firm does. You're going to have the feds come in and do an investigation. You're going to have an internal affairs investigation by the LAPD. You have a year to file a suit if you want to. The kid is not even in the ground 3 weeks, and his family is saying, hey, we will settle outside of court with the city. It looks callous. It looks bad. I don't think the mother should have done this, and I think you should have held back. You could have said, we're considering all our options, but now you're looking like, the family's looking like, I want to exploit the kid's death for money.
Well, that's definitely not the way that we see it, Mr. O'Reilly. And in our civil justice system, the only way that an individual, specifically a citizen, a civilian, can seek justice under these circumstances is through the civil justice system.
Absolutely, but why so fast? Why not wait and see how it develops?
Because we want answers, Mr. O'Reilly. We want answers. We're not getting them in the manner that we need them. We've seen a lot of demonstrations from the Los Angeles Police Department with regard to how this accident took place, and we've seen, as you indicated, that the chief of police is saying that this car backed into a squad car.
Right.
But we don't have any evidence at all.
But you will get that. You will, all right. So, okay, you want to know exactly what happened, so you file. Now, I'm worried about your client, the mother. I'm worried about her. She's vulnerable, number one, because the kid was out at 4 in the morning, and he's 13. Number two, she's got 2 felony charges against her. The kid was out at 4 in the morning in a stolen car. He was truant. He didn't go to school, and the mother's got 2 felony charges against her. You want to put her through that?
Well, this boy lost his life as a result of what happened.
Right.
He didn't lose his life because he was allegedly in a stolen car.
Yes, he did. That's why he lost his life.
He didn't lose his life because he was out at 4 in the morning.
Yes, he did. That's why he lost his life.
He lost his life because this officer fired 10 bullets into his vehicle, and that's why he lost his life.
Everyone watching.
There was no vehicle damage or anything that would have resulted in the kind of injuries that he sustained.
Tonight, everyone watching, 100% of the Factor viewers watching tonight sympathize with that. Nobody wants that boy dead. Nobody wants him dead, all right? It's a tragedy for everybody. There's nothing good about this whole case. I think you and I would agree on that. There's not one good thing about this whole case. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I think that one good thing may come out of it, and that's that because of this little boy's death, we may be able to prevent this kind of thing from happening to other little boys and other people in the future.
Well, let's hope that's true, but by having a restrictive policy against police defending themselves, if indeed that's the way it comes down, you might get police killed. You know, there were 35 police killed by vehicles in the last 5 years in the USA.
I don't know if any of those police were killed in jurisdictions in which they had policies like the ones at the Los Angeles Police Department.
I don't know. Well, no, one was severely maimed in LAPD, and that'll be brought up as well. But when you say the little boy wasn't killed because he was in a stolen car, that's wrong. He was killed exactly because he was in a stolen car at 4 in the morning, and the police officer didn't know he was a little boy, didn't know what color he was, because it was dark and they were chasing him.
The police officer also didn't know that the car was stolen. In this case, what you had, Mr. O'Reilly, at the most, was you had a youngster that had a tenuous command of the controls of the vehicle. This was not a life-threatening situation. This became a life-and-death situation because this officer made it into a life-and-death situation. And in doing so, he violated the very policies that his department promulgated to deal with these kinds of situations.
All right. I'm saying it's a dicey case for you guys, but I'm more concerned about giving the officer the presumption of innocence, and we should do that, shouldn't we not?
I would agree with that as a principle.
Thank you. As a principle, that's all I'm saying. And let's give him the presumption of innocence. Let's mourn the dead boy, the whole country mourn the dead boy, for shouldn't be dead, and let's let the 3 investigations play out, and then if there's negligence, if he did something wrong, if he's incompetent, then you go. And that's the way it should come down. I'll give you the last word.
The problem, Mr. O'Reilly, is that you're assuming that police have historically been able to adequately police themselves.
You're doing your own investigation, and the feds are doing one, so that takes it out of the LAPD. Well, I have confidence in you and your firm, Counselor.
And I thank you for that, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks for coming and being a stand-up guy. We appreciate it. And come back. We'll follow this case to the end. How's that?
I appreciate it.
Then, you know, this kid didn't have any money. You know, nobody's out there working appeals for him. Besides, what's the basis of the appeal?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, on that point, Catherine, I'd just like to clarify. I can give you lots of stories that are tantamount to the same one that Catherine talked about. I mean, talk about Rene Landa. He's still doing 25 to life. He had 2 residential burglaries dating back to 1972. His 3rd crime was stealing a spare tire from an undercover police officer. He's doing 25 to life. We're not saying that these individuals shouldn't do some time. What we're saying is that if you lock a man up for 25 years to life, that's tantamount to a death sentence. And if you're going to put that kind of crime on somebody, put that kind of punishment on somebody, that person has to be so bad. That person has to pose such a threat to the health and safety of the community that it justifies effectively killing that person, effectively taking their life away, and spending millions and millions and millions of the taxpayers' dollars to keep that person locked up until they die.
The Cochran firm believes that practicing law is about helping people. If you have suffered a serious personal injury, a wrongful death, or been abused by a law enforcement officer, call 1-800-THE-FIRM.
Well, if you're in a situation where you're on probation, any arrest is going to trigger a violation of that probation. When you have a situation such as the one that we're presented with here, the issue is going to be, is Mr. Brown going to be subject to arrest? And that decision is going to be made by the district attorney's office based on their evaluation of the totality of what happened. Specifically, was Mr. Brown principally involved in this altercation, or was it someone associated with him, such as a member of his entourage? Was Mr. Brown the person that started it? Obviously, there are no weapons involved, so this is not the type of thing that's going to rise to the level of a felony. But still, all of these decisions are going to have to be taken into consideration by the district attorney in determining whether or not arrest will be made. And in a situation like this, legally speaking, all of these things that happen in the past create compounding issues. For example, this is not an isolated incident. And the issue is the district attorney going to take into consideration the prior situation with Drake? Is the district attorney going to take into consideration the prior situation with Rihanna? All of these things kind of have a cascading effect. And it's always in the best interest of any person, whether you're a Chris Brown or whether you're just a regular person that has no notoriety at all, It's in your best interest to stay away from any type of physical altercation, but sometimes it's not as easy to do that.
That moment.
It's important to point out that in this case, the firing was so erratic that the officers actually shot a fellow deputy. In other words, a fellow deputy actually got hit and almost killed in the crossfire from another deputy.
Not just that, Brian. Look at all those photos where you see bullets in bedrooms. You see bullets in
the
kitchens.
kitchens.
Really?
It's just
Did the people in the
unbelievable.
neighborhood come forward and say, there's bullets in my house?
We represented them as well.
Okay. What has the sheriff's department's position been with this case?
Well,
Because this is 2 years, 2.5 years later.
The sheriff's department has not taken responsibility for this. And in fact, each of these officers, to the last one of them, have stated under oath that they fired because they believed that that vehicle somehow posed a threat either to themselves or to another officer.
Let's do this. Let's bring Winston on right now so we can talk to him, you know, everything that happened, okay?